Welcome to Rising Up for Justice, a special weekly series presented by Rising Up with Sonali, an independently produced subscriber-supported program syndicated to radio stations, free speech TV, and podcast platforms. I'm Sonali, Kolhatkar, host and executive producer. Our nation and our world are overrun by billionaires and bigots, but they are few and we are many. On this series, exclusive to subscribers of Rising Up with Sonali and viewers of Free Speech TV, we'll hear from organizers in the movements for social justice, and we'll dig into the nuts and bolts of values, strategies, tactics, narratives, and building power. This week on Rising Up for Justice, my guest is Courtney Hostetler, the legal director at Free Speech for People. There, Courtney leads legal strategies to protect voting rights and defend U.S. democracy. She has extensive experience advancing accountability and constitutional protections through impact litigation and advocacy at the state and federal level. Welcome to the program, Courtney.
Thank you so much for having me.
It seems as though protecting our Constitution and bettering the health of our democracy is more important than ever before. I know we always feel that way, but the stakes seem to have gotten higher and higher and higher. And you and I are speaking at a time when we have a president who is basically snatching and grabbing as much dictatorial authoritarian power as he can. In such a context, explain the work that Free Speech for People does, what its main goals are.
Sure. So going back to the beginning a little bit, we began as an organization committed to getting big money out of politics. And that's still a cornerstone of what we do, because the billions of dollars that are pouring into our elections coming from corporations and billionaires, entities both that built empires off the backs of people, and of course, the legal theories that the courts have accepted allowing this to happen, it's all an affront to our Constitution and a real threat to our democracy, and absolutely steps that led to the position we're currently in. Because big money forced open the doors of our democracy to corruption, both of the quid pro quo variety, but also to that general corruption that occurs when our elected officials aren't beholden to the people, but are beholden to the big money that's being thrown at their campaigns. And it has effectively silenced people without money and made them feel as if they are outside a system that is not built for or by them, which is the opposite of what our country was intended to do. So that's where we started. But as you rightly noted in the beginning, we are in such a moment in this attack on our democracy. Over time, we've expanded to other areas of work, including fighting for free and fair elections. It means fighting against voter suppression and voter intimidation, fighting against political disinformation, fighting for accountability in government, particularly for our Supreme Court and our executive branch, Trump and the people within his cabinet. And it all comes from this place, this core commitment that our organization has to political and civil equality, to this idea that our country only works with a system of civil rights that is fulsome and available to every person, where no one's above the law and all are accountable to the Constitution and to the laws of the states, of our localities, of the federal government. And so that idea that we're protecting our democracy from corruption is really core, a core idea that it backstops everything that we do. These, the pragmatic projects that we're engaging with, including demanding that local and state prosecutors actually investigate and prosecute federal officials who commit crimes on their territory. And that includes the people that they are conspiring with, right? So when ICE officials murder somebody, when they beat somebody up, when they kidnap somebody, they're doing that in concert with upper officials. And all of that typically is illegal under state laws. So we're asking local and state prosecutors to step up and protect their people, their residents, their laws against illegality. We are calling on Congress to impeach officials who are engaging in vast abuses of power. And that should not matter if you are in the same political, party as that person. Politics were never supposed to be this partisan. Our founders were, if you read the constitutional debates, they were very aware of the threat that tyranny poses to democracy. And that is why they built in these systems of responsibility across multiple branches. And this idea that Congress would abdicate their responsibility and refuse to impeach somebody who so very obviously has abused their power, is abusing the people of the United States, who is frankly abusing the position of the United States across the world. I genuinely think that would be unfathomable to our founders, and we are not living up to the demands that they put on us for what we would need to do to protect our democracy. And so demanding that our leaders be accountable, not just Trump, but the people who are allowing him to remain in power, is just has become a very critical part of what we're continuing to do, and really part of that initial goal of ours, which is to protect political equality.
And so the campaign to abolish ICE that Free Speech for People recently launched, I imagine, as part of, holding federal officials accountable, but also the call to impeach Trump, which I think in his first term, Free Speech for People was also championing.
Yes. Yep, from day one of his first term and from day one of his second term, because he committed impeachable offenses the moment he took office, because both of his emolument clause violations and because of a host of other violations that he committed on the campaign trail, especially this time around.
And so, how does Free Speech for People go about achieving these goals? Is it public education and working with local organizations? Is it litigation? Is it all of the above?
I think it's all of the above, right? So I'm the legal director. I work on the legal side of things, and that comes with litigation, bringing lawsuits, writing amicus briefs, writing model legislation, and doing the public education that comes around the call for impeachment. Why is impeachment appropriate here? What are the grounds for it? Doing that public education piece, writing letters to state officials about why they have a responsibility and duty to investigate crimes, even when committed by federal agents. So that's the legal side of things. We also have an absolutely brilliant campaigns and communications side of things that are doing fantastic work, not only on the legislation building, but also around mobilizing. We're seeing grassroots movements crop up across the country, and it's powerful and inspiring. And our campaigns team is right in the thick of that. And it's just a critical part of what we do, because we can't just be in conversation with elected leaders. We also need to be in conversation to the folks who are bringing the information to us, who are leading the groundswell, and making sure that we're part of that and sharing the information that can, best help those movements as well.
Tell me about the history of Free Speech for People. It's not a very old organization. I believe it's been around for about 15 years.
Yes, so you can time it to the day, because we were founded on the day that the Citizens United decision came down. It was decided just over 15 years ago, as you noted, and it fundamentally changed the nature of elections in the United States. There had been several concerning rulings before that, leading up to Citizens United, but this is the one that held essentially that corporations are people and money is speech when it comes to our elections. And our founders and early supporters realized immediately that the Supreme Court and big money interests were moving us away from reasonable constitutional interpretations and the democratic ideals upon which our country was formed, right? I mean, they realized it absolutely. They were ready to go. And it's a really impressive movement and organization that they built. And again, all on this cornerstone of we need to protect our democracy to protect and realize political equality. One does not exist without the other, and you don't get either if money is the thing that matters more than anything. And we're seeing that, right? We're seeing a country that is just, bleeding through with corruption and corrupt interests, and we're seeing what that is doing to our democracy.
How would Free Speech for People judge victory? Of course, Trump did get impeached in his first term, but the Senate refused to ratify it. And we heard Mitch McConnell give the most hypocritical defense of leading the Senate away from completing the removal of Trump. Would that have been a defeat for Free Speech for People? How do you know when you've achieved your aims?
I think one thing that Free Speech for People does, and the brilliant folks that I get to work with every day, including John Bonifaz, who is our co-founder and still our president, is recognizing that we get to celebrate the ongoing victories while keeping our eye on a bigger prize and recognizing that every prize we get, there's something else we can do to protect our democracy. So there are victories in the cases we win, even when it's a win before a district court and we fear, an appellate court might overrule it. There are victories when we, get 1 million people signing a petition saying it's time to impeach Trump, it's time to impeach members of his cabinet. There are victories when, members of Congress who had never supported impeachment before are now voting for impeachment because they realize they have a constitutional duty to do so. And we're still going for the bigger prize, right? We're still going for a point where the numbers in Congress who need to vote for impeachment do it, not because they do or do not share a political party with Trump, but because they realize they have a moral and frankly legal obligation to impeach. The Constitution absolutely demands it, right? That it is not a, well, impeach if you feel like it. It is a you shall impeach language. And we are well beyond that point. And so, look, we are looking for impeachment, conviction, removal from office, but we're not going to be blind to the other changes that need to happen. Even once Trump leaves office, there are other forces who are challenging our democracy. So we're not going to stop when Trump leaves office. There's other ways that we need to protect democracy, but nor are we going to ignore the smaller victories in protecting our democracy that we're seeing along the way.
Right, because the destruction that Trump wrought during his first term wasn't all reversed. When Biden came to power, some of it still stood, and then the original aspect of money in elections still remains, right? And it feels as though, just listening to what you were saying about the origins of free speech for people, that the unfettering of money in elections, we are seeing the predictable outcome of that when you allow this sort of unlimited corruption by moneyed forces and elites, you get fascism and authoritarianism, because that's the framework within which corporations, big business, wealthy elites benefit the most. Would that be fair to say?
Absolutely, absolutely. And they are going to do what they can to retain that power against the interests of our country. And we see that in US history. We see that in lessons that we should be learning from other countries across the world where they have seen their democracies crumble. We need to be standing against the encroachment of moneyed elites. And what I find both hopeful but very frustrating is that, it's really, the Constitution is there for the take. I mean, it is there. It is written that way. And when you go back, it's fascinating when you go to the constitutional debates, when you go to the Federalist Papers, when you go to the debates around the 14th Amendment, they understood the threats that tyranny, corruption, and inequality pose to this country. And they wrote a document and they wrote amendments to stand against that. And look, I don't want to idealize it, right? I mean, to say it was an imperfect vision is a massive understatement, right? Our founders, we promised equality, but we built our country on slavery, on the theft of land, on the genocide of Native Americans. And we had to, usually led by the struggle of the most oppressed people in our country, piece by piece, amendment by amendment, amend our Constitution, bring our laws to actually start realizing the ideals of what our nation should be. And again, led by these heroic and brilliant people who had been excluded from that vision, and they protested and they agitated and they led change. And it is so frustrating that we were kind of on the cusp of really getting somewhere with that when we started to see big money claw away at everything that had been won through such effort. But the core is still there, right? The legislative history of these amendments of the laws are still there, and we should be relying on them to make the legal arguments and be protecting, using our Constitution to protect what we are continuing to build.
This is a moment where most Americans, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe polls show that most Americans think there's too much money in elections, that our democracy is not safe, that it is eroding. All of that is also reflected in Trump's plummeting poll numbers. How do you center narrative and storytelling in the work that Free Speech for People does? I imagine that there is a lot of that wrapped up in the public education you do, really making clear and helping people clearly come to the conclusion that our democracy is broken and this is how we save it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will say this, I'm coming from a legal background, a lawyer's background, and what I have found is that every good law firm, especially doing this plaintiff side work, this protecting the people work, necessarily should be centered on people and the story at the heart of the cases that we're bringing. And I think one of the things that really attracted me to Free Speech for People is its commitment to the people and their lived experiences. And it's interesting because it can be so easy to lose sight of the individual when we're talking about hundreds and thousands and millions of people whose rights are at stake, whose ability to be and live peaceful lives in this country are at stake. And it's the individual whose story can help us recognize the humanity of the many. And I think that's really important, both the narrative and not letting the one individual stand above the others, but to be kind of that first step toward recognizing that every single person, when we're talking about tens, dozens, hundreds, thousands, millions, has a story like that and an individuality like that warrants protection.
And Courtney, I noticed on your website that there are a lot of videos that Free Speech for People has created showcasing your work. Let's actually watch a clip of one of those.
Our democracy is being tested like never before. Over 1 million people have demanded accountability, and we have brought that demand to Congress.
So nearly 1 million people have signed this petition calling on Congress to hold Trump accountable through impeachment and removal.
We have challenged corruption and abuse of power at the highest levels.
We have a reckless, ruthless outlaw who has found his way into the presidency
and built a nationwide movement to impeach and remove Donald Trump. Founded on the day the U.S. Supreme Court decided Citizens United, the ruling that unleashed unlimited corporate money into our politics. Free Speech for People has spent more than 15 years fighting for our democracy.
Multinational corporations spend unlimited amounts of money in Pennsylvania elections.
And that is an excerpt of one of the videos produced by Free Speech for People. My guest, Courtney Hostetler, is legal director there. Are these videos part of the narrative work that Free Speech for People does?
Absolutely. And again, I have to give massive shout outs to our incredible campaigns team who, I think speaking as a stodgy lawyer, I'm still learning how to engage in that, non-brief part, testimony part of things. And it's been really inspiring to get to work with the campaigns team who is just really recognizing the multiple ways that we can engage with folks across platforms, across age groups, across backgrounds. Because this is the groundswell that we need in this moment right now is really critical.
What are the main challenges that Free Speech for People faces in the work that you're doing? Imagine, staying on the issue of narrative, there's a sector of the American public that will never be convinced. They've lived in bubbles and exposed only to right-wing propaganda. In interviews, they will often contradict themselves because in the end, to them, anything and everything Trump does is right by virtue of him saying that it is. Is that your big challenge? Or do you think, well, that's just, we can write them off because there's plenty more other people that we can reach and do?
I don't want to say I'm going to write anybody off. And this reminds me of the language I make sure to use with my kids in my home, right? There is no bad person. There is somebody deciding to make bad choices. But anybody is able to wake up one morning and say, I have chosen hate and I don't want to do this anymore. Or this doesn't make sense. I'm suffering. My neighbors are suffering. People I don't look like are suffering. And am I actually okay with this? And is there a better way? And maybe I should educate myself. Maybe I should read more and read more widely, or watch videos by different people and look at my facts and think about what peer review actually looks like and really start questioning, right? Everybody is capable of that. And if we stop believing that, then I think that does real damage to our movement and our ability to use those narratives that you were talking about to reach everybody. Because what Trump is doing hurts everybody. It hurts everybody. It hurts the people who are his biggest supporters. And frankly, it hurts the billionaires, right? They don't want to admit it, but we live in a less good world. We live in a world less likely to survive. We live in a world that is less likely to be a wonderful place to live if their vision succeeds. I genuinely believe that. And again, I do truly think that there are always ways to reach people. And there are always ways to look, there's stories throughout history of people changing. So I do want to just say that. Whether that's our biggest challenge, I don't know. I mean, the way in which money and corruption is running our system against the will of the people, I think that's our biggest challenge, right? Because it's the misinformation, the disinformation, the fact that on Facebook, people can literally be fed lies in an ad that they think is news that nobody else sees. So we can't correct it, right? Because it's so targeted at, the zip code and the age and who they think people are. And all of this is really dangerous. And again, it goes back to money and corporations being given the edge, whose speech is being prioritized in our system. I think this is wrong. It's not just wrong morally, although it is. It's also wrong legally, right? This is not what the basis of our system should allow. And so I think that is really the big challenge of how do we redirect the correct interpretations of our Constitution, and if necessary, amend the Constitution to make clear that this is a system built for, by, and relies on political equality, speech by people, actual speech by people, and making sure the system is working for people. And that is going to be really the big challenge that we face, which is why we get from being formed the day of Citizens United to being an organization that is calling for Trump's impeachment, right? There are direct lines between these things.
Now, where does free speech for people fit within the universe of social justice organizations? I mean, obviously, the work that you're doing shouldn't be seen as partisan, because you're looking at making sure that the Constitution is respected and people's rights are respected. But sadly, in today's partisan world, you are on the side of people demanding social justice and progressive politics. So who are your natural allies?
It's interesting when I'm doing interviews, it's time, intern interviews and things like that. One of the things we talk about a lot is where they want to go with their career. And we talk about the fact that, we're part of a network. We are one strand in I imagine an actual net, like a fishing net, right? Trying to catch and protect people. And I think there's so many different ways that we can be doing work. And there's, we're doing kind of impact litigation, movement building, building, these new legal ideas. We don't survive without folks in legal aid who are making sure that people still aren't being pushed out of their houses, making sure that their kids are not being pushed from schools into prisons, who are making sure they're being treated fairly in the criminal justice system, and then we have people doing different kinds of impact litigation. We have people who are only doing grassroots mobilization. I mean, there are so many ways in which, the move to realize a more just system can come together. And so where free speech for people fits in that, It's a little bit of a shifting, we are so deeply entrenched in our legal work and the Constitution, but we also feel really strongly about bringing these ideas to the people and helping, hearing people's stories and figuring out how this world is affecting them and making sure that we're pushing for a constitution that serves the people as it was always intended to do. I see us being part of a really diverse group of people who are advocating for a more equitable system. And I recognize that's considered partisan. I strongly believe it shouldn't be. I mean, if there were ever a time where every single voter in this country should be an issue voter, it's now, and that issue should be democracy preservation. Because wherever you fit along a political spectrum, your voice only counts if we have a functioning democracy. That's the only way, right? So I don't think this is partisan. I do think this is, and I realize that I can't control how other people see us, but I really do think that all these moves for equality and justice is all part of how our country is intended to operate, and really the only way a functioning democracy can operate.
And then how do you engage with individuals, people who support the work that you do, if they want to join it? Is there a membership option? Are there chapters? What is the way in which Free Speech for People interacts with its supporters?
So we're not a membership-based organization, but we do, we encourage people to sign petitions. We really think this is a powerful way to demonstrate the breadth of support for what we're calling for, whether it be impeachment or overturning Citizens United. We also encourage people to get involved in letter writing campaigns, contacting their congressional representatives, their senators, their state representatives. So there's a lot of ways in which we try to engage, maybe help folks engage with the people who are representing them and try to make sure that we are sharing information that is helpful for them and making sure that we're also available to hear what they have to say and what their experiences are, because that often shapes what we do.
Give out a website for Free Speech for People and any social media links.
Yeah, so those are all available. Our website is freespeechforpeople.org, and we do have social media, I think on all the big ones, and all those handles are available on our website.
And I'll post that to our website as well later today. Courtney, I want to thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having us and for everything you are doing to keep this conversation alive.
My guest has been Courtney Hostetler. She's the legal director at Free Speech for People. And this is Rising Up for Justice. I'm Sonali Kolhatkar, host and executive producer of this new weekly half-hour series, exclusive to viewers of Free Speech TV and subscribers of my long-standing program, Rising Up with Sonali. You can find out more at risingupwithsonali.com.